Russ Collins.
Here.
Renee Graff.
Here.
Lee Gunn.
Here.
Jennifer Hall.
Here.
Roger Hewitt.
Here.
John Eachep.
Here.
Joan Lowenstein.
Here.
John Moa.
Here.
Thor.
Here.
Sandy Smith.
Here.
John Split.
Here.
We have a quorum.
We have a big audience today, so everybody, if this is your first meeting, welcome. We have 3 people who have signed up in advance for audience participation. We have 1 extra space if somebody would like to take it at the end. So first up, we have Ellie Saris talking to us about Treetown murals, art in public places.
We have a pass out or a handout that we're Good afternoon, DDA board members. I am here today with my partner in Fire Up Downtown, Roberto Dascola, and our friends Mary Thiefels, founder of Treetown Murals, and Maura Thompson, director of Main Street Area Association. We are respectfully requesting you to consider extending the grant the DDA board approved on July 11th of 2007 that set aside $50,000 for a piece of artwork, and I'm quoting the resolution, with the preference that this work be commissioned for placement on the 4th and William parking structure. It was also resolved that the DDA's ROC committee, and I understand that committee no longer exists, but the ROC committee shall work with the City Commission on Art in Public Places and other appropriate organizations to develop an RFP for this project. In accordance with the resolve clause encouraging collaboration with the Commission on Art in Public Places, Ms. Thiefels presented a mural project specifically designed for the 4th and William deck to the Commission in fall of 2008. She was told by the Commission that they did not have procedures, criteria, or processes established, and therefore could not approve the proposal. Since that time, Mr. Dascola, Ms. Thiefels, and I volunteered to sit on the Downtown Art and Public Places Committee, which is a subcommittee of the Commission, to try to expedite and standardize this process. Unfortunately, our efforts to bring art projects downtown have met with the same response. The good news is that the Commission has just hired an administrative director who we assume will help with the development of these procedures. As you can see, which is what Roberto handed out to each and every one of you, that we have a fully developed plan, including the artwork and a budget for a mural on the 4th and William deck. This project will serve as a model for establishing public art in our city, be an attraction in itself, encouraging visitors, and creating a beautiful landscape for our neighborhood. We come before you today to ask for a 1-year extension of this grant that will give us the time to get this project off the drawing board and onto the deck. Your support and encouragement of a streamlined process by which public art can be actualized in our community will be greatly appreciated, and we would welcome the opportunity to work with you on this. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Is the appropriate committee to discuss this request the new partnerships committee?
I think that's a place to start. Also, I'm working with the chair of the Public Arts Commission to convene a meeting of both bodies, and it may be most helpful to have the board of the DDA and the board of the Public Arts Committee meet so you can talk about this and other projects and how best to move forward. And then we can assign it to a particular committee.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Eli Cooper to give us an update on the connector study.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the board. First, I'd just like to briefly bring the board up to speed that the City Council did approve the adoption of the City Transportation Plan update at its meeting on Monday night. And the connector study, although not referenced exactly as such within the plan, it is consistent with one of the recommendations of that plan that has now been approved that suggests that we have need to look at some transit service studies in significant corridors, and that's where the connector study ties back into the recent action of City Council. The important thing to realize as I describe where we are with the evolution of the connector feasibility study process is that this is only the first step in what may be, and I hate to say this in a public place, up to a decade-long planning and design process. Connector-type service systems are subject to lengthy and detailed planning and design processes, so that this first step begins a process where we may be looking at this study for quite a long time before the first actual customers will be served by the system. As you may be aware, this item was before the DDA some time ago, and I'm going to limit my comments to some of the critical issues that have remained on the table as we've attempted to move forward. And there have been some changes on those issues more recently. The issues revolve around two areas. The primary area of the overall cost of the feasibility study, and the second element of who benefits and what are the appropriate shares of the financial arrangements for the undertaking of the study. Initially, and I say initially going back to 2006, staff of 4 agencies that include the DDA, the city staff, myself, AATA, and the U of M anticipated that a feasibility study might cost in the range of $250,000 or so. We were surprised as a staff group when, after we submitted our RFP out to the consulting community, the cost came in the range of $500,000 and up. The procurement process followed federal requirements for such process. So in terms of the costs, although we had received 3 proposals that were responsive, the group's staff got back together and said, do we want to proceed given the costs are dramatically greater than what was estimated? After looking at what was proposed, the amount of work, what's needed to, what ultimately will lead to the type of investment, the staff decided it was worthwhile to continue through the selection process. So the cost escalation, if you will, it really wasn't an escalation, it was an underestimate from staff several years ago, and the procurement follows federal requirements for such. The work that's proposed would meet the federal standards for that type of work. I'm not blaming it on the federal government, I'm just suggesting that there really isn't a significant opportunity to go back out and find cost efficiencies, because the work that needs to be done has got to meet the standards of the agency that ultimately might be a significant funding partner for capital construction in the future.
You could also do what we do at the DDA, which is blame Roger.
Well, you know, I'm not sure there's a Roger to blame on this.
Well, I was on the committee, so you know, it's fine. I'm used to it.
The second element is the shares. And back in the day when we thought it was a $250,000 study, there was a general expectation of the role that AATA would play, given it's a transit connector study, that the Transit Authority would pay a significant share, and that the remaining 3 entities, the city, the DDA, and the university, would equally share the remaining difference. What had occurred was that the initial thinking of the AATA role had changed, and we had all agreed to be equal partners at that moment in time. What has, and that's where we, and I use the expression, we stubbed our toe in moving forward, both based on the equal cost sharing as well as the overall cost. What has occurred subsequent to that is the federal government, based on stimulus funding and other transit planning resources, has enabled AATA to step up and say, hey, we believe this is a critically important need, and we have available to us at this time for this planning exercise 50% of the cost. So they've resumed a role that they had started with earlier, and are now, their board has adopted a allocation of some federal funds, not the stimulus funds, but funds that were available for planning, to outline the $320,000 level. The
Eli,
university.
that was the end of your 4 minutes.
Okay.
I'm sorry. You have just a brief.
Yes, I could just, the university remains committed to what was previously their equal share of $160,000, leaving the balance of $160,000 to be split equally by the DDA and the city.
And I think that our transportation committee would be a great place to put this topic for discussion. Thanks, John. Thanks, Eli. Next, we have Nancy Shore from the Get Downtown program.
Hello, DA. some wonderful buttons for the Commuter Challenge. They have Ambassador and then Commuter Challenge buttons just to acknowledge and thank you profusely for your support of the Commuter Challenge. I just want to give you an update of how it's going so far. It just started on Friday. We had an Ann Arbor News article on Saturday, and we have more people participating this year, more organizations participating at 132, and more people signed up to participate at 1,500 than we ever have. We have 60 downtown businesses participating, everybody from Google to Hobbs & Black to Arbor Brewing Company to Michigan Theater, DT Energy, JSTOR, all of the big names downtown. And what I think is most exciting to me is that I have been able to go into these businesses and do presentations to them personally, and at the same time I've been getting inundated with requests for how do I do bike commuting, how do I use the bus from downtown employees. So what I'm seeing from the Commuter Challenge is I really am getting interest in wanting to know about different options because it's something that's on people's minds. There was something in the Ann Arbor News, an editorial on Sunday that talked about these efforts in terms of raising awareness and said that it wasn't really about doing anything action-oriented, it was about raising awareness. And I really beg to differ. From what I've seen so far and what I've seen in the past, this sort of event really does get people to take action and try something. Just one particular example this year, SRT Solutions, which is an IT company that is in downtown Ann Arbor, has gotten really excited about the Commuter Challenge, and I'm getting all kinds of interest in them in how do I find different options to get to work, how do I do busing and biking, and also how do I get better bike parking downtown close to my building. And so these are businesses that I know we want to keep downtown, and they are starting to learn how they can get here in other ways besides driving their cars, which obviously is going to benefit businesses downtown, but also the employers. So again, I just wanted to thank you. Two other quick updates. Zip cars are going fabulously. I'm going to be providing a report to the Transportation Committee in a couple of months, but they have been extremely successful. We are even looking at maybe adding some cars in the fall. So it's that successful. And the last thing is Go Passes continue to get, we get interest from Go Passes every day. They're doing very well. So again, all of the things that you have been supporting are doing really well in this community despite the fact that gas prices are low. Clearly these are options that people still want, and I want to thank you for continuing to contribute to all these options as a board with your funding. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. We have one more space available. Okay, you jumped up first. And if anybody else would like to address us, we do have another section on our agenda later in the meeting.
Start my own timer so I can keep track of what's going on. Thank you for allowing me to speak. My name is Trek Klawacki. I'm a local software developer in town. I've lived here for my entire adult life, actually. Came for college and didn't leave. I'm different than many people who may address you in that I don't own a car. I've never owned a car. I don't drive, and therefore I do not park. I live close enough to town that I walk every day. In addition to being a software developer, I'm also what would be called, I guess, an information activist. I believe strongly in the availability of information, both public and private, to be made public. So I'm here to talk about public information at the DDA. The DDA already provides public parking data in real time to some individuals through their website. Access to other individuals is being stopped on a target-based basis. This is both an affront in many ways to how the internet is set up, and I would encourage everyone to think long and hard about this from a societal and legal level, about what the consequences of denying data access to only certain people are for what are called security reasons. We, the local tech community, don't represent always the large companies in town, but we represent the long tail. There's a lot of us, we bring a lot of money, we use a lot of resources in town. So far we are a large collective, but there are a great many of us, and we want to attract more tech companies to come to town. Actions like closing off access to public data to certain people generate a lot of bad press for the city, and that's unfortunate. It makes our job of attracting tech companies to town even more difficult. I understand that making public data available easily over the internet sometimes garners uses that people don't like, but often, sometimes, will get you uses that are extremely valuable, uses you couldn't think of on your own, because making data available, that's one of the best things about it. You don't know how people will use it. Sometimes it's disappointing, and sometimes it enriches the community. So that's all I have to say about that. I will give the rest of my time if anyone of you have comments about that.
We usually don't do discussion at this point, but we have started a discussion about this topic at our partnerships committee, and I don't believe we've finished that conversation. So you'll see the next meeting for that committee, and the committee will continue. to
I do
discuss
think it might be appropriate, though, to correct what I don't think that's accurate, and I'm wondering if Susan can take a minute to explain.
Well, I need to understand when you say we're excluding certain people. What we understood, everything is available to the public. Maybe if you can clarify, as a software person, who is being excluded from access?
When something is made available on the internet, it's available publicly for anyone to look. It's like having a conversation in a public room. What's been done is that a certain person represented by their computer address has been denied access, which means they cannot go look at this website.
Maybe after this meeting, not to delay you, if you and I can speak so I can understand who that person is and why they specifically have been excluded. I haven't heard any of this, so maybe at a staff level, that would be very helpful.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Reports from city boards and commissions. Ray Detter from the Downtown Area Citizens Advisory Council.
The first thing that I want to do, of course, is what's in front of you, and that is to invite all of you to the annual downtown party, which will be held on June 4th, 6:30 p.m. In the backyards of 120 and 126 North Division. Most of you have been to one of these events. Last year, I think we had about 200 people. It's a great schmoozy party. The food is good, the alcohol is good, and other refreshments, and it's rain or shine. So I hope that you'll make it. I'll remind you again before that event, but I want to get this in early because next time we meet will be the day before that party. Last night, the Citizens Advisory Council meeting was again a very lively one, and the meeting was attended by a very worried resident of Courthouse Square, who reported that conditions in that building are continuing to worsen. She reported 3 knifings among tenants since February, when I last reported to you on this issue. This resident believes the conditions are worsening because of a lack of good management, poor maintenance policies, the failure to do adequate background checks on new tenants from the Delanis Center, and tenant flight growing from a belief that First Centrum's tax credit terms of agreement to maintain the building are close to expiring. I've tried to contact First Centrum, and they just don't return my calls. Tenants are currently trying to get information from the City Police Department on the number of disturbance calls to the building. I've talked to the Housing Bureau of Seniors, which seems to be too busy at this time to deal with the situation. I've also talked to Alan Schulmeister about the possibility of closer scrutiny of senior tenants transferred from the Delanis Center. The complaining tenant has also been asked to join the Citizens Advisory Council so we can continue to monitor the situation and try to help in any way we can. Any city help that we can get to find out First Centrum's plans for that building would be very much appreciated. On a related issue, part of our CAC discussion last night dealt with the city's budget crisis. And like many other Ann Arborites, there are many services we simply don't want to cut, but we recognize that many cuts are going to be necessary to deal with the difficult current situation. We don't, however, believe that the city should use the DDA parking and TIF funds as a stopgap cash cow at the expense of the future of the downtown. We want the DDA to retain its autonomy in order that it can continue its commitment to retain and improve the quality of life in the downtown. We also believe that a strong police presence in the downtown is essential, including beat cops. It's essential for the safety and also the quality of life of not only the commercial, but certainly the residents living in the downtown. We also very strongly oppose, and we've done this before, any extension of street parking meters into the residential neighborhoods surrounding downtown, which is planned at this point in the areas we understand it of South 4th. Meters, as far as we're concerned, threaten the residential quality of those neighborhoods, are in conflict with the Central Area Plan's commitment to parking permit system in those areas, and threaten to encourage commercial expansion. It's also in conflict with the downtown plan and DDA's own development plan of 2003. So we hope that we can stop the extension of those meters into the residential neighborhoods. And of course, what people have said, they don't produce that much money anyhow. As you know, the CAC helped to facilitate the development of the downtown plan of 1988 and the Central Area Plan of 1992, and also the DDA 30-year renewal plan of 2003. We've always stated our public positions in relationship to those adopted plans. Most recently, we have played a significant role in the Calthorpe and A2D2 process, which has now produced rewrites of the downtown and central area plans, as well as streamlined planning process, new zoning, a new parking plan, a revised historic district ordinance and will soon produce, we hope, a set of design review guidelines. Last night, the members of the Citizens Advisory Council had a very heated discussion with regard to the nature of our commitment to all of these plans, and what we're going to do is systematically go over them all again in order that we can come up with a very strong position on any issue that relates to adopted city plans. Thank you.
Thanks, Ray. Next on our agenda, we have presentations, and today we have 3 presentations from city staff. I'm going to ask the board that what we do is we allow these people to give us their presentation, and then we move rather quickly through the rest of our agenda. We have just some status of task force efforts, and we have 4 subcommittee reports with no action items under those subcommittees. So if we could get those reports, keep it to about 5 to 10 minutes each, then we will ask questions and discuss the presentations at the end of our agenda under item 8, other DDA business matters. I just want to make sure that we get all the committee reports through before we take up maybe question and answer on these other topics, because it could keep us here a little while. So first up, we have Connie Pulsifer from the City of Ann Arbor talking about new public notification regulations.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the board. And with me today, I'm Connie Pulsifer. I'm the Senior City Planner with the Planning and Development Services Unit. With me today is Kevin Iyer. He's a Senior Application Specialist with the IT Department. We're going to rearrange furniture just a little bit here to accommodate a demonstration that we want to give to you about some new communication methods that the Planning and Development Services Unit in conjunction with IT have been working on in the past year. We have been working hard to try to come up with some ways for some more meaningful engagement from our community, and we have 3 new methods of communications I want to share with you today. One of those I think most of you are familiar with. It's the new Citizens Participation Ordinance that went into effect January 1st of this year. We're not going to talk about that ordinance because I have a handout that will explain that better. What I do want to do today is talk about 2 other methods that are internet-based from the city's website that allows the community to receive information that today that they haven't been able to receive in the past. So I'm going to give you the handouts on the Citizen Participation Ordinance. I think I'll wait to the end so that you listen to us here, and then and then we'll leave the other information. We have 2 new methods. So Kevin, if you want to pull up the city's website, Kevin is going to be more than my technical hand. He's going to also provide some information on one of our methods for communication. The first method that we want to bring to your attention is a new email notification system that many of you are aware of, and we announced at all of our meetings, but I thought this would be a really good opportunity to bring it to your attention. When you open the city's homepage, there's a little red envelope in the upper right-hand corner, and it says sign up for email updates from the City of Ann Arbor. When you click that envelope, it launches another page that allows you to sign up by clicking. No, it's not going to let me click. Okay, there we go. It allows you to sign up for a menu of options, and I'm just going to demonstrate with my email address. That allow the community to sign up for any announcements, alerts, or information that they want to receive from the city. And these email notifications are managed through different units at the city who send out information to the community. This is a subscription service, but it's free to any member of the community who wants to sign on to it. And you can subscribe and unsubscribe at any time. It is managed by an outside vendor who's managing the database, so we know that there's really good methods for managing this information. You can see that I've signed up for various types of communications. I manage the planning updates, and right now we have over 950 people who are subscribed to receive information from the planning group. And so I send out emails to people weekly, and we've gotten great feedback on this. So we just wanted to point this out, that this is something that's available. You can also manage your subscriptions. You can receive daily emails. You can receive a weekly digest. I believe you can also receive a monthly digest. And you can go in and change your information whenever you want. So that's one kind of method of communication we wanted to point out to you today. The other, Kevin is going to demonstrate. And this is something that we've just launched, and it's an online procedure for tracking planning petitions that are under review by the city. This is a real-time process where the minute the planning staff gets a petition to review, they enter it into our tracking system, and that then automatically is sent out to folks who want to get information about various projects. The idea for this feature came from a citizen at a public meeting saying that other communities were doing this, and so we joined forces with our IT group to try to see how we could improve on these methods in such a way that it would be meaningful and interactive to the community. And we really believe it's a very important step to provide timely information to the community. And Kevin will demonstrate.
Yes. So the other two options I'd like to discuss are RSS and what's called a mashup. So essentially showing the information geospatially on a map. And to get to the Petitions Under Review webpage, you would browse to the Planning and Development Services webpage and then click the Petitions Under Review link in the left navigation. And that will take you to a page where you can either subscribe to the email notifications or subscribe to the RSS feed to receive the notifications, or you can do your geospatial analysis either with Microsoft Live Maps or Google Maps. So I'm going to browse into Microsoft Live Maps. And so what you see is for each of the petitions under review, they're represented by a push pin on the map. And I am going to just use some of the features that are available within the Microsoft Live Maps mapping services. This is imagery that's called oblique imagery, and it really allows you to get close to the site. Now I'll browse to one of the petitions under review. So as you can see, this really gives the public the ability to do some geospatial analysis using the tools that are freely available. Does anybody have any questions?
The other thing I wanted to point out is on the, then they can also click on the project itself. It brings them into the tracking information that the city has prepared. It gives them contact information and who's working on this project. And the real benefit, of course, is that the community now is seeing this information when the petitions are submitted rather than waiting till get a notice on a public hearing. And then that was only certain people within a certain radius around the project. So anyone who wants to subscribe to this service through GovDelivery citywide can do that and learn about projects very early on. Or even if they don't want to subscribe, they can just get on the city's website and access the information that way. And so we wanted to make sure that you were aware of this. If you have any questions, I understand we're going to wait to the end.
Well, I think maybe for your item, if we have a few brief questions, I don't think we're probably going to take up a lot of time asking you questions. So we'll just maybe do them now, but the other items I'd like to hold for the end. So does anybody have questions,
Yeah,
Gary?
quick question.
Sure.
In the snail mail notifications of matters of interest to residents within a certain radius, do they push the electronic? In other words, do the notice say, by the way, in addition to this notice, check out the web?
You know, that's a good question, Gary. I need to look into that. providing more information in our public hearing notices, I think, is what your suggestion. And that's a good suggestion. I'll go back and take a look at how those are phrased to make sure people have access to additional information. Good point.
Any other questions, comments? Sandy?
Are you going to be doing any of these recordings via Twitter or Facebook?
I knew you were going to ask me about Twitter and Facebook. That is something that we're just starting to think about. I think really we're looking at all the various ways that we can stay current with our communications. And if Twitter and Facebook is something that we're interested in, we will probably be doing a survey at some point to see how people are receiving this information, to see if there's any other methods they would like to see us incorporate. But Facebook is one that we just recently talked about.
Right, and actually these notifications are going out through Twitter right now.
Okay.
Oh, are they? I didn't know that. Well, it shows you I don't use Twitter.
And we would follow you how?
Good question. By searching for the City of Ann Arbor's Twitter account, you'd be able to subscribe to.
So just under the City of Ann Arbor?
Yes. Yes.
Any other comments? I just wanted to say that I think this is very cool, and I was on the Planning Commission about 6 years ago, and this idea had come up then, but it was before Google Maps and the Windows Maps, and I think it was like a great idea, but nobody could kind of wrap their head around how to do it easily, so it probably wasn't easy, but it's really nice to see that the technology has changed to make it so accessible.
And that's what we have Kevin for, to figure out how to make it work. But
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time.
Next on our presentations, we have Tom McMurtry from the city's Solid Waste Department talking about automated trash cans in our downtown.
Thank you. I appreciate you giving me a little bit of time to talk about this project. As has been mentioned previously, the city is faced with, as everyone else, a lot of budget issues, and so I wanted to talk with you, as you've seen in the emails that have been going around, about an idea that we have to help cut our operating costs, and that is the automated litter container. As a little bit of background, I wanted to talk about what the current level of solid waste service is within the DDA. The litter cans are serviced 3 to 7 times per week, depending on the season. We've also got refuse collection in the alleys and around the streets. That's currently done 3 times a week. Recycling collection is officially done only 3 times a week, although our truck is out there 5 days a week. And all of this is manual collection, fairly labor intensive. And we recognize that the DDA is a special place, and very constrained spaces, needs this type of intense service, but I guess I want to point out that it is a higher level of service than we are providing to the rest of the community by far. I just screwed this up. What's that?
It went in the trash can.
Okay.
Let's hope it's just recycled.
Exactly. End of slideshow. That's not what I wanted to do. Okay. So. Next. Sorry about that. So again, the current system is fairly labor intensive. The benefits of going to an automated system, in addition to reducing the labor costs, would be that we would reduce traffic blockage that occurs when we're servicing the cans. These plastic cans that we're proposing are fairly graffiti resistant. They clean up more easily than the concrete containers that are currently out there. And these provide added capacity, approximately twice as much capacity as the containers that are currently out there. There are 3 companies that make the automated litter containers on the market. We've procured bids from all 3 of these companies. Toter, the one that's in the middle, is the one that came out low bid, and I personally find the most attractive, but they're all sort of similar in appearance, obviously. I did want to point out that these are available in different colors, and I can pass around the color chips for people to look at either now or at the end of the meeting. We talked to other communities to find out how the containers have worked in those communities. Minneapolis has used these extensively. They say the container works very well. They've received more positive comments about this container than any other. They use these in their downtown areas. They find that the trash doesn't blow out of the containers. They did point out that they don't use these in the student areas. Obviously, as these containers will tip over if you press them hard enough, even though they're weighted in the bottom, as was pointed out in some of the emails that was passed around. Louisville, Kentucky, the container, they also said the container works very well. They felt it was aesthetically pleasing. They use them around the downtown bus stops. They haven't had any issues with vandals. San Diego, California, also very positive. No complaints from the public. They use them at bus stops. And they decided not to use it around the downtown because of parked car issues.
Which
Truck couldn't be an automated truck.
Just getting at it.
Getting at it with the automated arm. Detroit uses these extensively. They say that the public has accepted these very well, and they use a total of 1,800 around the city. Akron, they say that it works so well that they're ordering 200 more, although they did point out that in this case they wanted to use the slatted metal containers downtown, in certain areas downtown, for aesthetic issues. So that was their feedback. So we called around to as many communities as we could to get their feedback, and this is what we found out. What we're proposing at the city is that this be a pilot to test the containers. See, just put it out there, see if it works in a limited number of locations. We're proposing 25 locations around the DDA. I emailed, and I have hard copies here of the locations that we're proposing. We'd like to do that and monitor feedback from the public as well as monitor collection efficiencies. The containers would replace the existing concrete litter containers. These are samples of the proposed locations. We've taken pictures of each of the locations that were proposed to be replaced. These containers are all starting to show their age. Very few of them have any tops left to them, and I think would benefit from being replaced. So that's my presentation. I wanted to, I guess, talk at the end
Are you
of the
able to
meeting.
stay just a little while longer to pick this up in about, hopefully, like a half an hour sooner?
Sure, that
Thank
would
you.
not be a problem.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Next presentation is from Mike Berggren and Pat Cawley from the City of Ann Arbor.
Sure.
They'll be talking about city parking meters. You have maps.
We have maps.
Okay. Do you know if our cameras will catch this back here? Okay.
It's just yours.
Turn the lights on.
Thank you. Oh, actually, I'll send it. You can all hear me, I'm sure.
Sure, the cameras are going to be able to. No, I mean the mic won't pick you up. It will. Okay.
I'll talk loud.
Okay. Thanks.
Well, thank you for allowing us to present this. You've probably heard some of this. I already mentioned part of it. This is a conceptual idea that's part of our budget process. It has not been accepted. It has not been approved by council, but it's out there, and we need to involve, obviously, DDA. It affects the DDA.
What we are looking at doing is installing some additional parking meters throughout the city. And the pink areas, the yellow areas, the blue are the new parking meters we're looking at installing. These are areas outside of the DDA. They're not within your jurisdiction. They're heavily parked right now. It's not a lot of turnover. It's not a lot of residential parking. It's people using the hospital, people using certain areas around City Hall. We're looking at revenues, relatively decent revenues on these. They're all based on current revenues of parking meters right down the street. So it's a true plan. Yes, we do feel for residents, we do have options to accommodate that issue if it comes up. But basically what we're looking at is adding, what's the count?
It's 208 meters spaces.
208 metered spaces within the jurisdiction of the Central Business District. One of the things we want to speak about is we are exploring the opportunity for the DDA to manage the system for the city. We don't do parking meters. We got out of the business. You're in the business. We are exploring the opportunity for you to manage it at a different revenue system the way it's set up. But that's something for us to talk about, and that's why we need to present this to you. Also, we're looking at another option or another plan that's out there for all the loading zones that are in the city. Every loading zone removes 2 parking meters. And there's a revenue loss there for the DDA and for the city. The parking, obviously the loading zones are there so people can unload their wares, stock the stores. And they're abused to a certain extent. There's other construction, anything commercial can park in them. It does not mean Cisco can come down and park right outside your door because someone else may be parked there for whatever various reasons. We are looking at actually permitting all loading zones, and yes, there will be a fee to the permit. We're looking at different zones throughout the city, trying to cover our loading zones. This would help the businesses or like the Cisco's, or if you're dealing with just Arbor Brewing. If you have to come in here and deliver their hops, you don't want a permit for the entire city. You want the lower price permit just because you're targeting one area. The higher price permit will cover the entire city. We also currently have enforcement issues regarding who can park in any commercial plate can park, or how it's if you're doing commercial business, this would tidy up all that.
Yeah, I was just thinking to add, the way it's structured right now, it's kind of coarse. It's either entire, downtown or a zone, and just 2 price structures. Been doing a lot of research on what other cities are doing, and there might be an option to do different classes too, where we get into vehicles that aren't commercially plated vehicles. If you had a flower delivery or pizza delivery, there could be certain zones that they can park in too.
And we are looking at making sure that in every zone there is a loading zone that's not permitted. So that for if you're coming into the city, you need to drop off something, you're not normally here, there will be a zone in every spot to park in. Okay. You may have heard, and I don't know, it's out there for public knowledge, some of it's in the budget presentation. We are also looking at targeting the 2 service drives out on Washington and St. Aubin. This plan of moving the meters closer to town is putting that plan on hold. The outside service drives are more than likely not going to be touched, but again, it's discussion we are having internally with staff that these meters make more sense, higher revenues, and allow our enforcement officers to target them because they're right within our targeted areas anyhow. That's about all we have. We thought we needed to update you on this though. and I'm sure you'll be hearing stuff, but we'll be here to answer
You
questions.
can stick around for questions. Thank you.
Could we ask Mike one question?
One quick
On
question.
an unrelated issue, could you explain to us the progress on the LED light program downtown?
The progress, thanks to your generous support, our LED light program, we've got about 300 left to install to do the central downtown. You'll notice it mostly on Liberty, going up towards State Street. We have struck a deal with Detroit Edison. We will be receiving our credit back to June for all the lights that were installed previously. We had to do an independent testing lab of our exact fixtures so they could get the numbers in. That'll look pretty good. We'll get our reduction in our energy rate. We actually are, and it's again in the budget, to go out and do like 830 Cobra heads in the residentials to get those converted over to LED lighting. We are also looking at some of the old globes that are out in Waldenwood and that area, doing the same thing there.
Just when would we be expected to be finished in the downtown?
Downtown within the next 2 months.
Great.
And then we should be complete downtown. So,
thanks.
Good.
Thank you. Next, we have status of task force efforts with DDA membership, A2D2 steering committee.
Okay. I think as probably everyone knows, the A2D2 steering committee passed the rezoning for downtown recommendations on to City Council. City Council took action, I believe, a couple of weeks ago on the sort of first phase of the approvals. Significant changes that were made is the City Council in the D1, the central core, put an overall height limit in of 180 feet, and in the South University D1 area put a height limit in of 150 feet. They removed the active uses section of the rezoning. They added a small D2 zoning in the South University area and another number of other specific changes. Still unresolved are such things as definition of how the floor area is determined, how parking is handled in the premiums, and how the premiums are applied. I would like to suggest, I think the DDA resolution on this was very helpful to council, and since there are still some unresolved issues that I think are affected by the decision to put a height limit on, I would like to suggest that we reconvene that ad hoc committee that came up with the first resolution to perhaps add the DDA position on those remaining issues before they go to council. I believe they are going to council for final approval on July 5th. I know it's early July right now. I'm not sure the exact date. So if possible, if people are interested, I would like to suggest we have that ad hoc committee meeting again in May and bring a additional resolution to the board in the June meeting of DDA. As far as the next step, next Monday evening, on the 12th, the A2D2 steering committee will be meeting again to take up the unresolved design guidelines issue. And that's my report.
Thank you. 415 West Washington.
Thanks.
John?
I just got an email back from Wendy Ramson this morning saying that Sue McCormick is trying to still work changes through the Finance and Labor Committee. I can imagine they've got a lot of things on their plate right now, so this isn't the highest priority, so we're still in a holding mode for the time being.
Committee to discuss a mutually beneficial financial agreement with City Council. Renee?
We have not met since our last full board meeting, and we'll be leading a discussion at our upcoming retreat to elicit board member feedback on how we should be proceeding. So we will talk to you in a couple weeks.
Thank you. Now we have approval of our minutes from April 1st, 2009. Would somebody please move the minutes for consideration?
So moved.
Thanks, Lee. Seconded by Keith. And are there any comments or changes to the minutes? All in favor say aye. Aye. The minutes are approved. Next, we have subcommittee reports. I'd like to remind everybody again, since we don't have any topics for board action, that we try to keep the committee report short so we can get to these other items at the end of our agenda. The Partnerships Committee, Sandy and Russ. making Russ do the whole thing.
Well,
Turn, isn't it?
because he was not at the committee meeting, I guess I will step in for him. We continue to get data about the energy audit, and it continues to be a wildly successful program. The payback is holding steady. It's about 6 years, which is 3 years for the participants. It is also going to be, from my understanding, used as kind of a model program for some stimulus dollars that are coming in. So it's, I continue to be pleased with that. We did talk about the retreat and the plan for what we are going to be covering. It is again from 10 to 2 on the stage of the Michigan Theater. And we will talk further about the city relationships with the DDA. We will break for a nice lunch and then finish with a brainstorming session for a couple hours. So 10 to 2 on May 20th. And then, let's see, we talked a little bit about some ideas about a 1% for the arts. The DDA has the program that we have for our capital projects. And there were some ideas about some of the nonprofits that were struggling. And it was much more ideas than anything firm. So that's still on the agenda to continue to talk. We also did talk about a little bit about data policy and website content, and we agreed that we have not, once we made our changes to the website and renovated it, that a lot of us really haven't gone back and spent a lot of time with it. So we agreed that we should look at it on a regular basis and maybe have our committee sit with a projector and look at it at least on a yearly basis and say, how can we make this better? What are we missing? What other information we can put up there? And we just started to really talk about that when we got to the end of our meeting time. So that will be on the agenda for our next meeting, which is Wednesday, May 13th at 9 a.m.
The agenda says something about recycle containers too. Is that not on your report?
We did.
Okay.
We did talk about them, and we talked about possibly having a design contest. I don't believe that we had any sort of a resolution to bring forward today.
Thank you. Any questions for the Partnerships Committee? Moving on to the Transportation Committee. Nicely done, too. I wasn't timing, but I think you maybe set a good pace. John.
Could I have Russ's job?
All right.
I want a committee chair. Couple of things. One is Nancy referred to the zip cars having been so successful at the kickoff of the Commuter Challenge the other day. We talked about the fact that in a couple of months we'll have some data. So I think we can expect that we'll maybe be having some discussions of where to put some more zip cars and how that program's going. So that's something that'll be coming up in the next couple of months. The focus recently has been on discussions on the link. So as part of that, at our last meeting, we did something a little out of the ordinary, and we did a movable meeting. We rode the link around, and I think it was great. To me, it was very helpful to ride it, and we essentially rode it over to South U area, and then came back and got off and walked back through downtown on the way. So it helped everyone get a little bit of perspective on what the link's all about, who's riding it, how often it comes, weather. We talked about, what's the weather like at different. It happened to be a nice day. We got lucky. So it gave us some personal perception of what it's all about. And then we're going to follow it up with a meeting on May 7th at 11 a.m. To have some more discussion specifically about the link with Chris White and Dave Miller from U of M is going to come. And we're going to really try to hone in on the particulars of what we're trying to accomplish with the link, or what our view of what the link needs to do. See what discussion comes with that with those folks, of what they bring to the table, of what could be done to make improvements or changes, or just how we want to approach the thing. So I think that's the major focus at the moment. Our next committee meeting will be May 27th at 9 a.m. and we'll also be carrying on our sort of discussions a little bit more about what we're trying to accomplish as part of the committee. We've kind of come to the close of having a lot of people come in and talk to us, give us some sort of broad input about what transportation is having that affects downtown, and we're going to try to sort of hone in a little bit. Renee is going to help lead us through some discussion about how, our purpose and focus. So anyone who can come, May 27th, 9 a.m.
Thanks, John. Operations Committee and Roger.
Okay, I'm a little handicapped on being quick because I got ever-popular financial reports to give. First, on our transition to demand management, I believe on page 13, you'll see a brief summary. We continue our pilot project with valet service at the Maynard parking structure. Certainly not wildly successful in its beginning, although we are seeing some growth. If you look on page 14, shows how often it's been used. Clearly, it's much more popular on Fridays than any other day of the week. And April, we're only looking at about half of April so far. So, but there was, significant growth between February and March. We decided that we should continue this for a full year to get a true feeling on how much demand there is out there. And certainly our experiences in the past with the link when it first started up, it wasn't used very much the first year, and then it really took off. So this has a lot of parking demand management advantages. If this is a successful program, we want to give it every chance for the pilot to succeed. Yes?
Did the committee talk about not doing it like on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday? I mean, Monday when there were 2 cars being...
Yeah. We did talk about, it's not taking off wildly. Should we wait? And I think we feel it's too early in the pilot to start changing it. Can you change it now, and then people start getting mixed messages about is it in or is it not in? So for the time being, we'd like to give it a thorough test before we start to decide whether it should be modified or dropped or whatever. And again, the ultimate goal is that you can park more cars in the same parking structure if you're using valet parking. We are into our 3rd month of using our AVI cards to hook up with software that charges people's credit cards as they come in and out. It's still also a pilot project that's being tested, and after some initial problems, we're getting a much more positive results out of the system right now. So it's, again, still a test, but part of the overall process. Hopefully in April, we switching over to magnetic tickets for parking validation instead of the stamps that we stick on the tickets now. They'll actually get a magnetic ticket that if they're in an automated structure, they'll be able to just put that in with their other ticket and get a reduced rate. So another part of it. The kiosk program is moving on. We are getting a new prototype on what's going to replace the parking meters. I know they are running into some challenges as you do with any completely new system, but we look like we're going to start installing those after Memorial Day, as well as having a marketing campaign that's going to go along with it called ePark. I think we showed at the last board meeting. And the customer service line we installed, so people who wanted to know, where is their parking available, at what structures, if they're full, we got a roaring 5 calls during the month, but that's on page 16 if you're interested. So it's a service we put in. It's not really, it calls the regular public parking number, so it's not really an additional cost. And although we've been publicizing it in the structures, hasn't proven very attractive at this point. Any questions? Okay. On to the budget report. This is through the 3rd quarter of our fiscal year, ending March 31st. Essentially, we are looking for things where there's more than a 5% variation from our budgeted amount, and to rather quickly point those out. Under our TIF operating expenses, we're about 10% over. That's due to a couple of city grants, primarily actually both dealing with City Hall. The City Hall project, new police court building, and the LEED certification for that, both were board approved, but were approved after our budget was put into effect for this fiscal year. So that's why we're over budget in that line item. Other than that, we're within 5% on everything. Same thing on parking. Parking, we are a little over at almost 10% over on our direct parking expenses, due to primarily two things. One, the additional cost of starting to put all these parking demand management systems in place is causing additional staff time, and also the living wage requirements in the union contract ended up with a 5% increase where they had budgeted for a 3% increase. And those are the primary reasons we are high on our direct parking expenses. Overall revenues, I should point out, even in this economy, are within 1% of what we had budgeted for the year. Parking maintenance, we're pretty much right on track. Again, most of the parking maintenance expenses show up in the beginning of the fiscal year, so we don't expect any major changes in that in the last 3 months. Well, we start construction projects as soon as the weather gets nice. The invoices usually don't show up until after we change the fiscal year over. And in the housing fund, our revenues are down a little because of lower interest rates than we had originally budgeted, and expenses, there was an unbudgeted Avalon grant in there. And I, probably more I than Joe, will be glad to entertain any questions. Okay. On page 18 is our bar graph. Again, the actual is for the year. The budgeted bar line is light gray. Not gray. I was looking at this in color.
Light gray is budget,
But,
dark gray is actual.
Thank you, Ross. Green and red stuff we got. And this is basically just a graphical presentation of.
Is the budget the year?
Yes, that's the yearly budget.
Okay, because the parking income is different from what you just reviewed on the spreadsheet, and I just wondered.
Yeah, well, what you looked at the
budget
spreadsheet was the projected year-to-date,
for the
expected revenues for the year, rather than the actual year-to-date revenues. That's probably what you're. But if you look here, what we are projecting is pretty close, very close to what we're budgeting.
I know, but so this is different than what these numbers are, because you're showing, on this spreadsheet, you were comparing year-to-date to the budget year-to-date, and on this
Correct.
graph, you're showing the actual year-to-date
Year-to-date
to
versus
the yearly
budgeted
budget.
for the year.
Got
Correct.
it, okay.
Mhm. There has been a request to try to clean up and organize our grant obligations, and this is sort of an intermediate step toward achieving that on page 19. We still have a couple bugs we're working out on this. Well, actually, it's different than the one that was that you emailed out, isn't it? Okay. Cross me up, Joe. But we're trying to look at obligations that we have made, amounts that we have spent toward those obligations, how much remains on those, when those obligations would expire based on our DDA resolution, that anything that we should remove any obligations that are go past the fiscal year or the next fiscal year in which they were approved. The last three columns look at our expected expenditures based on those obligations. And we have cleaned up, this has actually ended up being considerably shorter than what we originally had. So I will have to apologize that I was looking at an earlier version of this when I was making my notes. So we'll be glad to go over this, and we'll probably review this in more detail in the operations committee and bring it back next month. Next, our financial reports, balance sheets. Page 25, the list of actual and budgeted amounts of revenues and per various parking structures and lots. '27 and 28, we have our monthly reports. Again, amazingly, in this economy, we are still showing slight increases in revenue. which is certainly quite encouraging. Not very significant, but at least still there. So I think at a time when most people's businesses are showing losses, at least the parking system is still showing some incremental gains.
12% though, 12.43%, how are they thinking?
Yeah. Clearly, that's the number of. There's a lot of fluctuation in. The revenues are, of course, for the whole system, for the particular structures. The hourly patrons are obviously doesn't include the monthly parkers, and they fluctuate quite a bit. So as you can see, although hourly patrons is up, revenue is down, which means more people are coming in and staying not as long. On page 30 and 31, there's been a request to get some information on meter bags, where we waive the cost of those meter bags, how much revenue we are giving up by waiving those meter bag fees. On page 30, there's a detailed summary. The overall number is of $152,000 for the 12 months that ended July 31st. About a third of that is from art fair. Another roughly a third, a little more over a third is, excuse me, what am I looking at? Another third is two specific projects the DDA approved, the YMCA demolition and the Zaragon Place construction. Another $30,000 of that is other nonprofit events, about $7,500 in home football games, and another $10,000 for various city construction projects. And then there's the detail on all that. The last page, 32, we have a memo from Joe about our official business permits. We're not suggesting any action at this time. This is just a recommendation staff has brought forward that we would like to notify you. What we're considering is the official business permits that are given to the local government for public parking and so forth. That are a flat $75 a year. Staff would like to replace those with our automated cards, our smart cards that you can stick in a parking meter and pay by the usage rather than the flat card, because there have been certainly some abuses, as well as it doesn't really encourage people to use the parking structures. It subsidizes the use of the parking meters, the more valuable on-the-street parking spaces. So I'd certainly like any board input on that, so when we bring this back up at operations, we have a little direction.
Any comments?
Yeah, okay. Sounds good to me. Sounds good to you. Okay. Okay. I have one other issue I'd like to at least bring up for, if not discussion, at least future consideration. We have been approving a number of grants in the last few meetings that have not been in our budget. With the parking structure construction coming up, as well as the other projects we proposed, we are certainly looking at a place where we're not going to be able to approve everything that comes down the line. I would like to suggest that we look at specific budgets for specific areas, which we have had, that these be assigned to specific committees, and that the committee has free hand to work within those budgets for specific areas, much as we do now. but that if there is something that is beyond the budget in a particular area, that will need a revision of our 10-year plan and a revision of our budget, that before that resolution is approved, it should go to the Operations Committee to review what impact that would have on the 10-year plan, how that would be financed, and have the Operations Committee come back with a recommendation to the board on the financing of any particular grant or expenditure outside of the budget. And I'm just throwing out not a resolution or a policy change at this point, but just something I think we need to start enforcing some discipline on grants that we make, and I don't want to get into a situation that whoever gets there first gets the money, and that when we're out, we're just out. I'd like it to be a little more ordered and thoughtful process.
Renee?
We had discussed this in the committee, and I agree that we need to always be looking at non-budget items in terms of the overall 10-year plan. But I was sort of approaching it from a different standpoint, which is that each one of the committees obviously is familiar with the 10-year plan, has access to the 10-year plan, has access to staff, and that it would be incumbent upon the committee to do that analysis of what the implications would be for the 10-year plan and make a proposal to the full board for discussion and decision. I am a little bit leery about giving one of our committees sort of special power to direct the priorities for the overall board. If we were to do that, to me, that would be a radical change in the way we conduct business, and I think it isn't something we should enter into lightly.
I'm not suggesting that the Operations Committee would by any means have a veto over any budget, only that they review what financial impact any unbudgeted item has and make a recommendation to the full board to consider.
And my fear is that over time, when, as we all know, people forget how things got started and what the initial impetus was, that over time, a recommendation from the Operations Committee will be, although not a veto, a very strong suggestion one way or the other.
Lee?
Well, I think the idea is less of a recommendation than it is, this is the information you need to know in order to make a decision. And I think the Operations Committee is really capable of giving that kind of information. So instead of using the word recommendation, I think we should use the word information so we can keep control of our budget, because we've gotten out of control a little bit. We're trying to tighten up.
Russ?
Yeah, I think the critical matter here is that funds are being granted that are outside of budget. And so the budget can only be altered through the entire board activity. So I think there's probably two things to think about here. One is how we construct our budget. So if we are allowing each committee a certain amount of grant dollars, then those need to be baked into the budget at the beginning of the year so that it allows the committee to respond to opportunities. That's what we did with the Partnerships Committee. We took a look at what was happening over time, how much money was going in that way. We said, let's do this, and then we directed it in this particular frame of funding towards the energy grants, although they could have been directed towards any number of other things. And so maybe that's the policy, is to essentially work out of a budget context, both in terms of providing money, a budgeted amount of money for each of the each of the committees. But then if the committee is asking for funds outside of budget allocations for their particular committee, then we have to agree as a board to revise the entire budget to accommodate that particular grant request.
I think I'm not opposed to having each committee have a budget to spend within, but I think we need to be careful about what we're calling grants and what we're calling smaller projects, because certainly our bigger projects already talk through the Operations Committee to see how it impacts our bigger capital improvement projects already have that input from Operations Committee. And I think what it's the smaller items like, you know, the bike racks or like wayfinding before it got to be a bigger project, and the smaller grants that we give to organizations who come and request them that are, you know, kind of like these, I don't want to call them nickel and dime kind of things, but they tend to come, we consider the request, but then they add up to be a bigger thing. And I just...
Those nickel and dime projects are budgeted for, and there's a discretionary fund that the director of the DDA has.
Some of them are, but some of them are just kind of generated by the committee. And so I think I'm not opposed to having the committee have a budget. I just don't. I think it would be imprudent for us to get to a point where the operations committee is giving us input on like a $2,000 or a $20,000 expenditure that's outside the committee's budget, because that seems to be, you know, versus $5 million. You know, there's some gray area in there, and I'm not opposed to the operations committee coming up with some sort of idea and presenting it to the other committees for their input. Sandy?
I don't really see that there's that much of a cause for concern to change the way that we do business now. We've had a handful of very small grants that we've approved at this point. I think we all know that we've got several very large projects, and that we're not talking about starting another very large project, because we know we've got to get our pig through the python, right? So I don't see this as something that we need to really change the whole scope of the way that we're doing business right now.
Anybody else have a comment? Okay. Anything else, Roger?
No, that is all. And our next committee meeting is Wednesday, May 27th at 11 a.m.
Thank you. Capital improvements and John.
First, wayfinding. We have a project that is out to bid. Corbin will be looking at those, at what comes back, and they'll give us a recommendation at the next committee meeting, which is a week from today. And so hopefully we'll have a resolution back to the board next month and get started and get wayfinding going forward. 5th and Division. There's a meeting tonight. Susan, do you know what time? There's a meeting tonight at the Union. Okay.
The Wolverine Room at Michigan Union.
Okay. There's a meeting tonight for businesses that will be affected by the project on Division. It's being held at the university. The university also has a parking structure which has been started, and so anybody who is interested in how they will be impacted and wants to have input, the meeting 6:30 at the Union. 6, excuse me. Parking structure. We are continuing. The design team is continuing to give us detailed drawings, and we will, of course, have those back again at the next meeting to review. The environmental report is back, and the soils are clean, which is good news. We still have hopes that we're going to be able to transport those out to the airport area, and again, moving them as little distance as possible. But that's still being worked on. But it is good news that the soil is clean and can be moved anywhere. Infrastructure relocation talks are continuing with DTE, ATT, and Comcast. We have another meeting with them again a week from today, and that's ongoing. Adrian is working on easements for, again, all of the utilities, electrical being the most important. They've had a meeting with Kemp House and are going to meet with them again and take something to the board on May 11th. There's a transformer which we would like to relocate to the Kemp House property. Apparently they are somewhat reluctant, so we are working that out. Adrian also has a meeting scheduled this week with First Martin Corporation and the restaurants along Liberty, along the north side of the project, trying to, again, work out easements so that DTE can move the electrical lines. that's really all I have. Next committee meeting, next week, Wednesday at 11 o'clock.
Thank you. Any questions? Other DDA business matters. Let's first take up questions or comments about automated trash cans in the downtown. Anybody have questions for Tom about the trash cans? Lee?
Well, Gary and I didn't want to appear to be dumb. So we asked each other, what makes them automated? And we asked John, and he knew, so I thank you.
Yeah, that's a very good question. I apologize for not having made it clear that they're serviced by the trucks that now
Pick them
service
up
all
and
the carts in residential neighborhoods.
But I have a follow-up question related to this. With the 25 test cans, does it use the same arm or piece
Correct.
of equipment? Okay, it doesn't need, this isn't a specialty piece of equipment then?
Yep.
Okay.
Specifically, it's the same lifting mechanism.
Roger.
Sorry. I'm sorry. One other additional comment, and I think I mentioned this in the email. One of the things that's nice about these containers is that the top can't be lifted or opened unless the container is flipped upside down. So, that reduces the number of people opening it, and if it tips over, it won't open up unless again, it's tipped upside down.
Roger.
I have a particularly concern in the campus area. I certainly, I'm all for automated trash cans and the cost. I think that as they're currently looking at, they are way too easy to tip over. And we tested one out here, and Susan could tip it over.
I think they look a little bit too much like tackling dummies. Actually.
Yeah, that was one of my concerns. The other is, you've got a large area that is not only a great attraction for graffiti, but particularly posters, where they will take tape and wrap it around those things to put their posters up. The only way you can get it off is to cut them. So pretty soon, if they're plastic, whoever's coming around with a mat knife to cut them off is eventually going to, cut up the whole face of the trash can. I would much prefer something that could fit into one of those rib cans, which are not very attractive for posters because it's very easy they're hard to stick on and they're very easy to come off. So if something could be designed where you can put that trash can into a larger, permanently affixed fixture, I think that would be a much better solution, particularly where there are a lot of students around.
Right. Yeah, I understand your concerns. Currently, the parks staff are going around and cleaning up containers. So, with regards to removing anything that's taped around, they would have to be instructed not to use a knife to do it. I've researched this extensively in terms of what's on the market currently, and it's only the 3 containers that I showed in the PowerPoint presentation. There is nothing else that's available in terms of something metal or more of a slatted metal design. So that's,
How is it picked up?
it's picked up by the trucks that pick up the curbside trash cans for residential neighborhoods have an arm that come down and it cinches it around the can.
Around the base or around the top?
Around the middle.
Okay, so you couldn't have it inside another.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, it has to
You
look
could have a
like
shorter,
Well, yeah.
shorter
Right.
recess.
Can I answer something on that? Sure. Since I'm from field operations and represent solid waste, one of the issues we've looked at, again, with the automated arm, if you want to leave the base in, for the arm to pick it up and then put it exactly where it came from is pretty much impossible. These are not robots. These are trucks that move and shift, and when you load them, now you're off, and to drop it back in the exact same hole, it makes it pretty much impossible. And currently, the cans we have, and you were talking about flipping them over, and Susan out there knocking them down at night.
I got nothing else to do.
We do experience quite a few of our stone ones rolled over because they're a challenge, and everyone, people like challenges, so they do roll those over occasionally too. So it's not a perfect world. So we do have to figure out another way to approach this as a operations. The cans we have now are with their open top and the way they're designed, fill up with snow and ice, and we can't empty them. Our crews actually physically have to lift them out. You've got 2 feet of frozen ice and water and trash in them. It's hard on the staff, and you can't empty them. So we really have to figure out a way around this.
John was waiting.
Okay.
Well, I was going to say, I've always been against cameras in the city, but if we could catch Susan in the act.
We can GPS your phone.
That's right.
Okay.
Tell you the time and place.
This is why we're doing a pilot, and we'll find out all these things, whether it's going to work or not.
Right.
So,
Yep.
John Mulla.
My question is, the one slide where the reason they decided not to do it was the parked cars business. How? Obviously, we're an urban downtown with cars everywhere, so
Right.
I'm kind of curious what their parked car problem was that's different than ours. And really, the true question is, with the location of the cans, where do they have to be for those trucks to be able to access them? And would they be only ones at certain corners? And
Right, typically we put them in around the street corners. I did send around a document electronically, and I didn't print it out for this, but the 25 locations that we identified are either near a corner or, away from parked cars. So basically you just need the space for the arm to be able to, you can't have a tree directly overhead. You need to have space for the arm to go up and down. It can operate in a fairly tight space though, but you can't obviously reach behind a car.
Right. I think the residential ones where they're out over on the curb, and I've never paid that much attention to them about how far they can reach and where these things would be located.
My suggestion is the flaw in this diagram is that very few of them are up in the campus area. And that's where they need to be, I think, to do the pilot.
You'd like to see some around the campus
I
area?
would like to see most of them around the campus because that appears to be the area of threat in terms of behavior. And of course, one where Susan can't get it.
Sure.
Tom, could you maybe pass around the little color cards?
Sure.
I'm just interested to find out if there's anything that's that they provide that's nubby that would be graffiti
It's all
aversive
got a
or
little
something.
bit of texture to it, and it can be power washed off fairly easily. Several of the communities that we surveyed mentioned that. So if it's spray painted or taped on, it's easier to clean than the concrete. It doesn't absorb.
My concern, in addition to the ones already raised, is that the trash cans, I went and looked at the one out here, and I think there's one at the park, there's a couple at parks. They're very suburban park looking, and I feel like aesthetically they don't really, at least in the green color, don't really fit in with our downtown feel, and so that I just feel like it's going to be very aesthetically displeasing, especially along Main Street or Carytown or
I would
State
recommend,
Street.
in terms of the color, perhaps going with this is a dark, what they call, no, not the black stone. Dark gray granite, sort of a nicer, it's more of a concrete color. And might look nicer. The green ones we've chosen for the parks because, usually around grass and stuff.
Tom, I also know, and I haven't done any more follow-up, just I've seen it once, on the diag, there is a university, I guess, has a trash
Big Valley,
compactor.
yeah, I did have it in my PowerPoint, and I guess it's that's a compacting trash compactor. It still needs to be manually emptied. If go by and look at that now, it's been spray painted. And
oh, has it? Okay.
Heavily. So it does have a smooth, in terms of the painting, that vandalism problem, it is problematic with that design.
Yeah.
It's an interesting concept. They're very expensive. And again, they have to be emptied manually. They're about $3,500 a piece versus $300 a piece for these.
And they have to be wired too, right?
No, they're
It's solar powered. They're solar
Pretty
powered.
interesting, but they have this. The one on the diag has been spray painted on the side.
Russ.
So, why are you asking us about this? I mean, are we going to be? Are you going to be asking for funds to purchase?
No, we're going to. We're providing the funds to purchase them. We're coming to you to sort of to get your. It's a partnership. We want to make sure that you're okay with us doing this.
That's really darn nice. And I mean I mean that.
That's marvelous.
Because, I mean, clearly you don't I don't think you have to ask us to do this. I mean, you
Um,
want to inform us and get some input.
Right,
and
basically,
that's
you know,
great.
right. And as John mentioned, this is a pilot. We want to put them out there to sort of test it, see how it works, get people's feedback on things like the aesthetics, see how often Susan tips them over.
How long do you expect the pilot to go? Are we going to go through a winter season? Just
I would say at least a year or so. You know, come back to the group, talk, and see.
Well, I think you should put them in front of the Michigan Theater, because we can give you a lot of input.
Okay.
And they're easy to access there, because you can't park cars in front of the Michigan Theater.
Okay.
Sandy and then Susan.
I'm just wondering if there's any institutional memory in the room as to how we have the concrete ones now and whether they were in response to a tipping problem, Susan or otherwise.
The concrete ones, to my knowledge, and Mike, maybe you can address it too, were John Newman, the former solid waste director, had made the choice on those. And we wanted fairly short ones because of the lifting problem, having to lift. We didn't want them too tall. I believe at South University they have some taller concrete ones, and
Yes.
they were just horrendous for the drivers to lift up and out. So it was just something that John Newman had come up with over the years and had bought for putting around the city. We have continued to have, and today continue to have problems with the lids on those things. As I mentioned in the PowerPoint presentation, the locations we all looked at, all the lids were all missing or bent. So.
Susan.
I know you guys need to go on to some other topics, so maybe mine would be a very quick question. You wanted to get feedback. Are we going to place something on them eliciting comments, much as we did the LED lights? You had to please tell us your feelings. There was a website.
Right. No,
Is
that
that
would
your
be a good
intention?
idea. Yes.
Okay. So at the end of this pilot program, all of you and the city as well will understand what community sentiments were.
Excellent. Any last comments or questions? Thank you very much for sticking around.
Great,
Thank you
thank
for
you.
being here.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Tom.
Next, let's have questions or comments for Mike and Pat about the parking meters. Who would like, and I'd just like to ask people if we could kind of raise a hand instead of jumping in because it gets a little unmanageable that way. Who wants to start? John.
Got a question?
Yes.
Has the university weighed in on their take on it? Obviously, some of these areas are
They're close to them.
their turf.
They have not weighed in on them yet. This, you have to remember, this is a concept. As staff, we are always charged with coming up with new programs, new ideas as they relate to the budget and trying to solve operational issues. This is a conceptual project that's out in the budget. It's a budget recommendation from field operations. The budget has not been passed, as you know, so this is not a solid plan yet.
Would that be part of the process to
Yes.
reach out to them?
As a matter of fact,
Reaction.
like Pat said, we're communicating with other agencies that are doing this, trying to get it so it works for majority of the people.
Sandy and then Gary.
A couple things I'm concerned about is the numbers projected for the revenue. The cars, or the spaces that are on, like, in my neighborhood in North Ashley, there's like 2 cars there during the course of a whole day, and there's 25 meters. So it's not, you know, as you get away from the hub, you really don't get the kind of return. And I just, for one, I'd like to just kind of see how those
These were
numbers
actually, the places we've placed the meters are, and the revenues we're associated with them, are based exactly on your revenue system right now from parking group.
So
we should be
based on
relatively close.
an average
Yearly basis.
But that's taking an average from across the whole system per meter, or is it in a zone or a vicinity?
There
Or
was more segment by segment. We were given some segment by segment ranges of what different segments of streets produce annually per meter. We kind of extended, the existing system. We try to be conservative, use the low end of that range.
And again, some of the areas we've targeted are, we've spoken with parking enforcement, community standards. They know that these areas are heavily parked. That's the ones we're targeting up by the U of M hospital. They're heavily parked. They're not a lot, doesn't afford any turnover. If you've ever gone to the hospital, it's hard to find a parking spot near there unless you're in their deck. So it does provide some turnover. There are businesses located in there that aren't afforded the turnover rate, so people have to park farther and farther away.
Will you be using kiosks or meters?
Ongoing discussions with the DDA.
Okay. I think there's some used meters.
We heard there's some used meters on the market, and we'd be trying to grab some of those too.
$2 million each.
Or maybe for a dozen.
Gary?
Yeah, when I first heard of this, in anticipation of this meeting, I was under the understanding that some of the proposed areas were in the DDA. Is that not true?
There are two areas that we're not going to address at this time that are within the DDA. That's a separate issue.
Yeah, yeah, it would be, and I guess
that has truly nothing to do with our budget plan or anything else. It's just while we were looking at this, it was brought up to us, so we were looking at that.
Yeah, well, I mean, quite apart from perhaps legal issues, you know, one of the practical issues is the obvious, which is partly why you're asking us perhaps to talk about helping to manage it or take over that part of it, is that it's not really easy to take a parking meter and stick it in the ground somewhere and expect to make money. And I know you know that. That's really what the history of this DDA is really all about, at least going back to the original parking agreement. I'm wondering if, given the fact that we've been approached by the city, we have a committee to talk about whether we're going to reopen the existing agreement or whether we're going to do something else, and the issue of enforcement's on the table, whether this really could be part of a larger horse trading session. I mean, this is a money issue for the city, and it has to do with parking. We have expertise. There are other parking issues on the table. I don't know, maybe it doesn't make sense, but maybe it does, to think of this in the larger context of what else we're talking about vis-a-vis parking in the city.
One of the reasons we're here.
Joan? Have you looked in the places that you have proposed them to see whether they're sort of consonant with ATA bus parking areas or stopping areas and that sort of thing?
Yeah.
It looks at me and
well, there's existing parking there right now.
Yeah,
all these are
locations
places where there are
parking.
existing parking.
That's where we got the receipt counts from. They're currently parked.
I could see some areas that now may be used as more of a park and ride where somebody is using that as parking and getting on a bus stop.
And again, that might be the talk that you were just saying, that if we're looking at this as an entire plan, and this is just another piece, let's incorporate, while we change things, let's bring it up to where it should be.
I have a question. I know that there's been a proposal in the city's budget to eliminate some of the community standards positions, and those would be, I think, the people who enforce the meters right now. And so given this huge expansion of the system, what's the thought about how that all ties together in terms of less people to do enforcement but more meters to enforce?
I can't talk to them, unfortunately.
Have you done any calculations on the cost of collecting?
The original cost of collecting, we've had some discussion with parking. It's all baked. The costs for our total projections are baked in for installation of meters, enforcement of meters, enforcement fines, and collection. So the costs are all baked in.
I guess my concern continues to be projections, and this is areas that are parked up, other than maybe right by the hospital, but there are also areas that are free parking that are adjacent to downtown. So it's not exactly the same thing as to say that there's a metered area next to it, and then you come to the end of the metered spots, and then you have free parking. So people then circle until they find spots like that, and they park there.
That's correct.
Currently. So I think putting a meter there automatically is a deterrent to some parkers who will then go to the next block over and find the next free space. So I guess I'm still.
We agree, and our cost estimations, obviously we're going to the low end of the world because again, you don't know. You can't put a parking meter here and say it's going to be full every day. We understand that.
Renee?
Just one other thing that I think the discussion is even maybe more complicated. Even though right now you're not talking about areas that are within the DDA actually manages all of the meters, even the ones that are outside of the DDA. So it's kind of not really germane whether or not they're in or outside of the DDA. That when we contracted with the city, we actually contracted to do all of the metered spaces. So just, I'm sure you probably knew that, but I just wanted to throw it out there that I think it's a very complicated.
It's a very complicated, back to your entire parking agreement. And yes, we're well aware of that, and that's where we need to go forward.
John?
So is there a committee that is going to get us
There is a committee.
do it? I don't think we've formally talked about that. So.
Well, when they're finished, I do have a resolution to address that.
Oh, okay.
We're talking to ourselves until.
I had one other comment that I wanted to make about you had mentioned that you had talked with DDA staff about the management of these meters, and I don't know that that's been decided or not yet, but most users of our downtown don't know where the DDA boundary is and that they're walking across it. So one of my additional concerns is that these areas which are just right outside the DDA area, lots of people don't recognize what is in the DDA and what's outside the DDA, and having kind of a two-part system for parking really fractures the ability to manage parking as kind of a contiguous system, which is what we've been doing up to this point, which is what Nelson Nygaard in our parking study said should be done. And so that's another one of my concerns, is that we have these very, we now have two systems, and most people who are walking around don't know that, and if there's different rules or different mechanisms or whatever, it makes the experience downtown not as pleasant, and the ability to manage parking and its demand not as easy.
That is correct, and we understand that also. So again, this is a conceptual plan, and there's a lot of legwork to do to, if it is approved by council, to wrap this up and make it so it works for everyone's benefit.
Any other?
I just have a question for John. I'm wondering if council is planning on voting for this without having the discussions with our committee. And if not, we're running out of time, and I'm wondering when you plan on seating that committee.
This will be up on the 2 weeks from last Monday.
So do you expect that we're going to have these difficult negotiations before then, or is DDA not going to be
Well, I
included
don't
in this
expect
decision?
the meters to be placed immediately.
Right, but you're making a budget decision based on, you're making a decision that will instruct that. So you don't plan on communicating with DDA prior to that?
I think we're communicating with
You don't
DDA.
plan on negotiating with the DDA committee that you asked us to put together prior to the council voting on its budget?
I don't think that was the administrator's plan. Council can certainly change any of that.
Any other questions for Mike and Pat? Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Joan?
Yeah. Well, related to all that, we did discuss this issue in the executive committee, and as part of that, I have a resolution here that I'm going to pass out, and I'd like to move regarding discussions about this.
Is there, if you want to look at it before we have a second?
I will look at it also.
Okay. Moved by Joan and seconded by John. And why don't we give everyone a minute to read it?
I'll just state for the
good idea.
people, and we have some extra copies for the public. Maybe Keith can hand some out there. that this is a resolution requesting that the City Council reconsider the action of adding public parking. And basically, it simply asks that this be a topic of discussion between our mutually beneficial, et cetera, committees to discuss, because it is all related. And so we are not necessarily opposed. We just would like to discuss all of the different possibilities. As our two city staff members mentioned, one of the considerations that they've been looking at is the question of management of extra parking meters, and that's something that the DDA is under contract to do with the city. And so we think that it should be discussed as part of that existing contract.
We'll need a few more minutes to read it before we discuss it.
Was there a second? I'm sorry.
Yes, John seconded it.
Point of order.
Yes.
Can we do this under the Open Meetings Act, given that it was formulated in the executive committee and first presented now? I don't know. That's not a critical question. Just
It's not a question of the Open Meetings Act only talks about the meeting.
the notice of the meeting.
The notice of the
content.
meeting, not the content.
That's fine then.
Anybody have comments, questions for the executive committee? I just want to say that I think it was really important for, since this is the only opportunity that DDA will have as a board to say something about this pretty important change in the way the parking system is being proposed. I know it's not been decided yet, but we won't have a chance formally as a board to weigh in on it before the council approves the budget and this concept in the budget. So it's really important that we take action on this and send some thoughts council's way, because again, we won't have a chance to do that all together before 2 weeks from Monday, last Monday. Sandy?
I obviously am skeptical about the ability for the numbers to be met and to be realistic about it, and would support this resolution in that it really is asking for, a dialogue before that's put into the budget. And I think that's the way that I understand it, is to say, hey, this needs to be part of more of a discussion before this is something that the city is counting on for revenue. I also am thinking as the parking system as a whole really does need to be maintained under one jurisdiction, or looking at it as a almost organic system rather than bits and parts. And I am more in favor of looking at the edges of the DDA and looking at residential permitting to those areas in order to resolve some conflicts that we're getting with some of the neighbors, because they have people parking a lot in those neighborhoods right now, and it's difficult to get snow removal, it's difficult to get leaf removal, and that's what I'm hearing from neighbors. Putting meters there, I don't know, is the solution, and we've had dialogues about what are the possible ways to resolve the conflict between the near neighborhood streets and cars, and I don't know that meters are what the answer. It's not the answer that we came up with in some of our neighborhood discussions. So that's another piece to this that I think is missing. So again, it's got to be looked at in a more of a totality than, here is an empty street that seems to have a lot of cars on it, let's put some meters.
Joan, and then Gary.
Well, just to follow up on that, and we did discuss this in our executive committee, that's basically the idea, is what Sandy just mentioned, is that the parking system is a system as a whole. And so, for example, one of our pilot programs is to go towards the payment kiosks rather than putting parking meters up all over the place. And it would seem to be not really a good idea as part of that whole system-wide plan on some of these other streets to put up a lot of parking meters that may not be aesthetically pleasing or may not be as efficient if what we're going to go to eventually are the payment kiosks. So that's just another issue that deserves some dialogue before it is solidified as something that the city could count on as part of the budget. And again, not that we are opposed to pursuing these different places in order to bring in additional revenues to the city, but that we should do this in a systematic manner.
Gary.
Yeah, I agree with all that's been said. I don't know if I want to propose a friendly amendment, or maybe it wouldn't be friendly, but I think it needs to be said, just as a paranoid lawyer. The whereases mention all of the policy, and correctly all the policy issues surrounding this, but I wouldn't want City Council to go ahead without some sort of, whether it be on the tape recorder the recording that's being made here or somewhere, that there are also concerns about the legality given the current contractual structure we have. Now, I don't know what that means. I don't know if it means that it's a violation or if there's exclusivity or non-exclusivity. I just don't, none of us know that right now, not even have the contract in front of us. But I sort of would like to see that somewhere in here as a whereas there's a concern about legality.
As the maker of the motion, would you like to
I think
respond to that?
we considered that to be addressed in the first whereas about, and we could put something in there. I would consider it friendly to say, whereas the A2 DDA has managed by contract the off-street parking system since 1992. If that I would consider it friendly.
I think that would.
Okay, and friendly to you? Okay. Lee.
I have a friendly resolved. I would like to delete the last resolved and say resolve the DDA will discuss this issue in more detail at its May 20 retreat and prepare a recommendation for the City Council.
I'll give you a point of order.
I don't know, but the May 18th, I believe, is the presentation of the budget. So
well, budgets can always be changed. Budgets are a living document, and I think that we need to really explore this as a board rather than giving it to a committee that really isn't needing very much, and just say, let's all get all the information we need, particularly the contract, in front of us. And then say to City Council, you may have passed this, but you could think again. Or we like what you did, one way or another. Because, that's the next time we're going to meet. Their schedule is faster, but budgets are flowing documents.
I'm going to ask Joan first, as the maker of the motion, whether that's friendly or not.
I don't want to say it's unfriendly. I would never say anything was unfriendly from you, Lee.
Well, thank you.
Yes, I'm just, the retreat is not a place where we're going to make any resolutions or policies, so I'm just a little worried. I can say we can, I would consider it perhaps in addition to this resolved, and we will discuss this at the retreat.
And make a recommendation at the June meeting?
Yeah, I think that's
But are you
fine.
considering it friendly to delete this resolve?
No, I would say it was I would like to have it a topic of discussion between the committees and add it as a retreat and June meeting discussion.
I just want to, I don't know that we'll be able to have a recommendation by June, because part of the reason it's been frustrating not being able to get the process going with the city is there's actually information that we need from the city in order to formulate a recommendation. And so I just want to say, if we discuss it in May, we might not have all of the data we need to make a recommendation for the June meeting.
At a board meeting? Would that be better?
At a following board meeting.
Board meeting.
Okay, so what I have now here is the proposal for a friendly amendment. The second resolve is staying, but we're adding that the DDA is going to discuss it at some future board meeting and prepare a recommendation for city council. And you're considering that friendly?
Yes.
And your opinion is?
Friendly enough.
Friendly enough. So, okay. So, all right, so we have it amended. Again,
Can I
friendly
ask a
amendment.
question about the implications of that? Because the committee structure that was put into place was actually put into place at the request of City Council, and so now I'm not sure where we're headed with this. Are we still going to negotiate with the city? Is the DDA just going to decide this is what we're offering? Now I'm not quite sure what the procedure is going to be moving forward and what the expectation is on the part of council about the committee that they asked us to put together.
Sandy's committee.
Sandy.
To be appointed by the mayor.
Whatever.
I think that we'd be happy to talk about that at that committee. Obviously, the city council has had their docket filled coming up with a budget. And I was going to speak to that process in just a moment. But that would be an appropriate conversation. I don't know that it would need to be in the mutually beneficial subcommittees. I don't know why it couldn't just be in the partnership committee, because that's already appointed and they meet normally and move forward with different issues. So one of the things I was going to offer was that we would just have an excellent topic of discussion, and I was going to input the partnership committee there rather than the mutually beneficial subcommittee, but that's a small point, and I was going to ask if that was friendly.
That would be friendly.
Yes. Just substitute partnerships to
Chips
for
committee,
mutual
yeah.
Russ?
I'm going to vote for this because it doesn't really matter. This is, however it's amended, friendly or unfriendly, because all it's saying is that we have the intention to communicate something to city council. And whatever details or we put in there or leave out of it, it's essentially just expressing good intentions or intentions. So, I mean, I don't know that this is necessary at all, but apparently the powers that be feel that it is. And because it's just expressing intentions, let's vote on it.
Are you calling the question?
No, that was poetic.
Keith and then Renee and then John.
Let's see. I too believe I'll be given the choice of aye or nay, voting aye, and largely because a lot of this is about there isn't enough information right now, and we need the information, and so I guess I would be voting aye because I want information before I go and make a decision on anything, and I think my preference would be the mutually beneficial subcommittee, but I guess if that's already been changed, only because that was a vehicle that apparently both that council and the board agreed upon as a method of moving forward.
Renee?
Yeah, I was going to say, unfortunately, I agree now that we have defanged this by taking out that it needs to go to the mutually beneficial subcommittees. I think doesn't really do anything, and I'll vote for it anyway because I do think the city needs to consider this more fully and really understand the revenue implications for itself. But I will, probably don't need to, but I will voice my frustration at the fact that the reason it was sent to that subcommittee was because that subcommittee is going to be maybe renegotiating a parking agreement that the city is trying to renege on that we have already paid out all of the money on. And so that was the reason that that subcommittee was put in charge of figuring out what we do with this request from the city that has to do with the parking agreement. And obviously, if the city wants to, sort of take up its own meter business that we run for them and give them the revenue for, that has something to do with the parking system, and it would be appropriate that it would be discussed in the larger context of the city's request that we reopen the parking agreement to give them an additional $2 million a year. So I think that's why it was important that that be in there.
John?
to me, a related piece to this is timing, to understand the factors related to how it affects the rest of the parking system. So, for instance, I don't know how much of an opportunity staff or Republic or the operations committee has had a chance to ponder what this means. And I guess that's sort of, no, I'm not on the operations.
We haven't pondered it all.
I'm not on the operations committee, but the people have talked about the moving parts of this. And I think another moving part is the idea of downtown residential. People have alluded to that. So to me, there are quite a few folks that need to be brought to bear on this issue to give input. So I guess I just throw that out there in that I think it's going to be very important for various folks to participate beyond any one committee, and how that gets, and the timing of it. Because if we're committing to having a certain piece of information back to council, I think we just have to make sure we've got the timeline and the right people in place to do that.
Joan and then Lee.
I think just to dispute with Russ, just because I like to dispute Russ no matter what, I think it does matter actually, because this board can only speak through resolution. And so, we either have little whispers going back and forth, or we have a resolution. And all this resolution does is really to speak for us, to say to council that we think that this issue is probably premature for the upcoming budget, and that there should be some discussions about this before there is a council vote that might be voting based on information that is, I won't say incorrect, but is simply not formulated completely enough to be part of a budget.
Lee.
And I agree with John. I just think we need to express our concern. And if they vote for it, they vote for it. If they don't, they don't. But at least we've expressed our concern, and then we can take it from there. So I think it's a fairly benign resolution.
I wanted just to add that I'm kind of disappointed that the subcommittee was taken out of here. I have no problem with the Partnerships Committee being able to discuss this with the council representatives on the committee. The one problem that I see is that that's not kind of a designation of council in order to negotiate or to discuss on council's behalf. The council members come at our, basically DDA's request, to sit as part of our committee so they can hear what we're talking about. We can kind of bounce ideas off of them, get their feedback, but those individuals are not asked by council to be at the table, and it's not really a place where a negotiation of that sort can happen. And so I think the importance of having council seat their committee, which they by resolution asked us to engage in a dialogue, and I don't know how we're supposed to be able to have that dialogue if it just keeps happening unofficially or at this table without an actual council appointed committee that can carry the weight of talking on council's behalf. And so I think that this is just one more piece, this idea of parking meters, that would be really great for that committee to be able to discuss, and in a much more elevated, important way than just at our partnerships committee. Sandy.
I don't think that there's any reason why the mutually beneficial committee doesn't meet, maybe even in anticipation of the partnerships meeting, and do some background work and dialogue about and bring a presentation to the partnership committee. And we have an awful lot of people that attend that. I mean, it's not the full board, but it is very well represented, and it does have council members and a planning commission member usually in attendance. So I think it's a good place to do that. If you wanted to put a little bit more meat into this resolution, if you were worried that it had been softened a little bit, you could look at the first resolve and take out the word reconsider, and you could say remove the plan. That basically you don't want them to reconsider it. You want this off the table in this particular budget. I'm not sure if that's friendly enough.
Proposing that?
It's just a thought. I mean, you're asking him to take it out of the budget, and maybe that's premature. The discussions that the committees will have.
Joan.
So you're proposing that as an amendment to remove?
I'm not even sure if I am. I don't feel real strongly about that. I think that the first solution is better, is to have a vibrant discussion ahead of the Partnerships Committee, and then bring that to the Partnerships Committee and continue the dialogue.
Okay. I think I prefer the reconsider language.
All right, any more discussion on this resolution? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? The resolution is passed unanimously. Do we have any other DDA business matters for discussion today? John?
I did some. I just wanted to give you an update on a couple of things. The city budget process is ongoing. We had a public hearing on Monday night. Next Monday night, we will be having a working session on the budget, and the chief of police is going to be there. I asked him today, because we meet every Wednesday, to present his plan, and I know there's some questions from folks in the downtown, so it'd be a good opportunity to tune into that if you have those questions about how this would work downtown, and having to do with how tickets would be written in the future, given that there could be a reduction in the forces of the folks who do that now. I think the chief, you'll learn a lot if you listen to what he has to say. He's also going to be at the Downtown Marketing Task Force meeting, the next one later this month, to talk with those folks about how the plan would work in the downtown area. He's very confident that his plan is not going to mean a drop-off in service or a drop-off in policing ability in the downtown. So you should hear it from him, and he'll explain that to you. I'd also wanted just for us to be on notice that the plans for the East-West Railroad seem to be moving along. And in fact, SEMCOG has set the date of October 23rd in 2010 for the opening of the East-West Rail. And so that would need to be, there will be AATA coordination to bring people from the train, which has the potential to carry thousands and thousands of people into the downtown area or to wherever they're going. So we might want to just start to pay a little more attention and treat that more as a concrete measure, because indeed the date has been set. The same date was recited to me. I've been speaking quite a bit with the head of MDOT, Kirk Steidel, and he believes that that's a firm date as well. So it might be something that we want to begin to think about as we talk about how people getting into the downtown area and how that might affect parking, because there certainly would be some people perhaps that might get on the train and come into the downtown area. And as well, the conversations are continuing on the north-south rail. And the head of MDOT has again expressed a lot of confidence. MDOT is taking a greater role in making that happen. It's going to need some revenue enhancement. As you may be aware, Michigan stands to lose something like $500 million in transit, and a little bit of it will be transit. Most of it will be highway money to repair our roads in this state. If we don't come up with a match. And so there's discussions going on in the state legislature about how we might come up with a match. We need to come up with $100 million to get to $500 million. So hopefully the state of Michigan won't lose that money. Nobody needs it more than us. So there's a lot going on in that area that is up for discussion. And as we heard in a report Monday night, if you take a look out not too many years, Ann Arbor is expected to have great many more, even despite the Forbes report yesterday, is expected in the out years because of the University of Michigan having to refill the Pfizer campus with people and some other things that are going on in the community. The projections of the number of workers who would be coming to the city are very, very good for our parking system. And the thousands of workers in the next decade or so of new jobs in Ann Arbor. So that's something that we might want to get a hold of and make sure the DDA members are aware of that too, because the rail, it would appear, is not going to be enough to satisfy the parking need, particularly given the fact that we have some parking areas that are either going to age and need to be put out of service or be replaced by the underground structure. The Brown Block, we're still on notice that could be redeveloped, and a lot of different things. So I think incorporating the transit into our planning would be wise for us to do. But the budget process moves on, and we'll hear from the police chief and others next Monday night. And then, of course, as it always does, the budget will be up for a vote on the 18th.
Thank you. Sandy?
Two quick things. I wanted to point out in the transportation plan that was passed that the it's identified the Wally coming in, and it asked that the link consider rerouting itself to be that circulator to bring people downtown. So as much as we had that discussion about where are the stops and what's up with the link, that's something to consider. And then just a kind of fun thing, in one of my 100 trips to Fingerly, right up on the counter is a big pile of elephant snot. So it is thanks to the DDA that people can go in if they have graffiti on their buildings and pick up some graffiti removing materials, and it's featured prominently, and they're very happy about it. I couldn't resist.
You just want to say elephants.
I did.
For the record.
We make sure that goes on the minutes.
It's on camera now.
Any other DDA business matters? Are there any people who have lasted this long meeting who would like to address us for 4 minutes today? Thank you for your patience with us. And do we have a motion to adjourn?
Move we adjourn.
Moved by Roger, seconded by John. We are adjourned. Your vote of opposition.
We never